We're beginning the Tanya. Okay, Perek Aleph. Yalakuti Amarim and Sefer Shabbeinin in Perek Aleph. Tanya, we learned B'Seif Perek Gimel Nida, in the end of the third Perek of Nida, and I'm sure you guys know that it doesn't say Tanya, it says Dorosh Absim Law. The Alter Rebbe has Shinui Girsis over here, Anashir Nonabreg, from the classic version of this. Mashbiya may say the person is made to swear to Yitzadik Val Rasha, he should be righteous and not be evil. And of course, Mashbiyim goes on the Neshama, not in the Nefesh Abamis. And even though L'chera the Neshama wants to do the Ratzinalia, Mashbiyim means to give it power. Lashon Seva, to fight with the Yetzer Hara. On the other hand, if the whole world tells you you're a tzaddik, you should view yourself as a rosh. There's a little bit of a contradiction. They give you koiches that you're a tzaddik, and then you should say you're a rosh. And of course, the answer is going to be, they give you koiches to be a tzaddik, which means a beinani. And Kol Kul tells you you're a tzaddik, b'shem atayat, yebenecha kirasha, also means beinani, not rasha, but kirasha. Kirasha means shemagia leike ma'aser rashayim, which is beinani. As Alter Rebbe is going to say in Tanya Perek Yud Gimel, he's going to answer this kasha. And the question is, first of all, the obvious question is the one I just told you. But the second question is that non-obvious Perek Beis says in Mishnah, the obvious, a person is not allowed to view himself as a Rosh. So how could the Gemara say Masechta Nida that a person should view himself as a Rosh? And again, the answer is, it doesn't say Rosh, it says Kirosh. But moreover, if a person is going to view himself as a Rosh, now in the meantime we're assuming that it means Taka Rosh and a Varyan, not a Beinani. Yeda Lavav, you're going to get bitter. The also we're going to get depressed. You allowed to the Shem b'simcha of tivah you're not going to accept Hashem with joy and gladness of heart, which is an aveda unto itself. Plus, that when you usually fall into Maroshchet and to Atzvos, it brings to bigger avedas. And what's even worse, and perhaps you won't feel bad at all, and then bringing him to lightheadedness. So the basic kasha is, how could the Gemara say, view yourself as a Rasha? It's against the Mishnah, and it's against psychology. It's against the Mishnah and against psychology. A person to be besimcha, a person who comes to Barasha, he's going to get depressed, and worse than depression is not to cure altogether. These are the kashas. To answer this kasha of Rasha and Kir Rasha, the Alter Rebbe goes into the inyan of Kina B'tzini B'Gemara Heichal. Look, it's finding Gemara 5 categories: Tzadik v'Tevele, Tzadik v'Rale, Rasha v'Tevele, Rasha v'Rale Benyi. Now, I want to tell you how I learned this always. The Alter Rebbe is writing a sefer of Pnimiyas HaTeira. Pnimiyas HaTeira is going to give us the Pnimiyas definitions of Tzadik, Beinani, Rasha, which we'll get to momentarily. But the Alter Rebbe, like Bechal by the Chassidische Rebbes, by the Chabad Rebbes, they don't begin with Pnimiyas HaTeira. They begin with Nigla. And they go from the Nigla to the Pnimiyas. Okay, and if I may say so, the Iker Moker of the Pnimiyas definitions of Tzadik, Beinani, Rasha is that I mehem ne Pashas Mishpatim. The Zohar is the most important Eichocha to this Shita, as the Alter Rebbe himself indicates in the Haggoah. We'll see at the end of today's Shia. The Iker Raya to the Shita that Tzadik means no Averis, no Yetzer Hara, and Beinani means no Averis, is that I am the Pashas Mishpatim, the Zohar, which is Pnimiyas HaTeira. It happens to be corroborated also by the Gemara Masechta Brachos. But Beklal and Shas, Tzadik, Beinani, Rasha has a different definition, and the Alter Rebbe chooses to begin the discourse of Tzadik, Beinani, Rasha dafka with the Shem HaMushal. He starts with the simple pshat, and he goes from the Nigla to the Pnimiyas. Now let's translate. Tzaddik v'tevle means that tzaddik was a good begashmias. Why? Because he's a perfect tzaddik. When you have a perfect tzaddik, you deserve sayel amada, sayel amaba. Tzaddik v'ram tzaddik was a bad begashmias. Why do you have it bad begashmias? Because you have some avedas. So the Eibishter punishes you in this world, takes away your avedas, so then Nathan you should have only schar. Rasha v'tevle means that Rasha was a good begashmias because Rasha has some schusim. So the Eibishter gives him a shalom, elseinav alponav. Lahavide, he gives him schar in this world so that in Gehenim he goes straight again. Rasha v'Rale has zero schusim whatsoever, and because he has zero schusim, so not only in Elam Haba does he have it bad, in Elam Haza he has it good as well. But Beinani means he's average in everything. Sayin Gashmis, Sayin Yeruchnis, and so forth. This is the Pashat Pshat. Upirish B'Gemara, and the Gemara translates Tzadik v'Tevle to the Gomer. Why is there a Tzadik who has it good Begashmis as well? Because he's a perfect Tzadik. Tzadik v'Rale, why is there a Tzadik who has it bad Begashmis? Because the Tzadik she'eni Gomer. Now, these definitions of Tzadik, Beinani, Rasha are classic. On the next page, Alter Rebbe is going to call it judgment, nidun, right? How the person is judged. These are classic definitions of Tzadik, Beinani, Rasha, right? This is the Gemara in many, many places in Shas, and it's the Halach. Rambam and Hilchos Chuvin Perek Daled brings on this Gemara that a Tzadik means more than 51% good, which means you judge for a good year. Over there he's talking about Rosh Hashanah also, not just for a good life, but for a good year. Rasha means more than 51 or 52% bad, which you judged as a Rasha and you have a bad year. In a year and in a lifetime. But Beinani means approximately 50-50, because the Rambam brings that Shleisha Pishi Yisrael V'al depending on what Aveda, you get a couple of extra. If you have one more Aveda than mitzvahs, you're still a Benyani. Two more Avedas than mitzvahs, also a Benyani. 3 and 4 depends which Avedas, and depends if it's a Yachid or it's a Rabbim. There's stipulations in Rambam how it works, but 50-50 is not exactly 50-50. In other words, you get 1 or 2 leverage, and then it's tailored. They didn't have a Benyani years that they don't pass him, and they see how you're going to behave between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Or if a person died, how his family is going to do things with Chusay of the Nifter to give his Neshama an Aliyah, and on that basis, the Benyani either listens to the Madregas Tzaddik or he falls to the Madregas Tzaddik. This is a classic definition. Okay? So the first thing, Matzinu B'Gemara, which Alter Rebbe brings without showing a source, he just says Stam Matzinu B'Gemara, and I propose because it's in many places in Shas, the definition of Tzaddik means more than 50% good, the definition of Rashi means more than 50% evil, and Benyani 50%. And he immediately begins with the Zayah. Oh, but I'm the Pashas Mishpatim, it's arguing with us. Because over there, Pirush, he translates, what is Tzaddik V'Rale? It's Tzaddik whom it is evil. Shahara Sheboy, the negative which he has, Kofuf is leaning and bent, Letev, to good, V'choli, and so forth. Now, we know what Tzaddik V'Rale means. Tzaddik V'Rale means a person who's more than 50% good. V'Rale means he has a bad bagashmias. Why does he have bad bagashmias? Because he has a miyat of Ra. Correct? Balabatish. No problem. But the Zayar says, Shahara Boy, the evil in him is Kofuf Otev. That means to say his Yetzer Hara is bent towards the Yetzer Tev. Now wait a minute. A person's Yetzer Hara is bent towards the Yetzer Tev means to say that your Yetzer is not fighting. But you translate the words, Ra, your Yetzer Hara, Kofuf Bottle Otev is Bottle Otev. Al Rebbe talks about Barichas and Perich Yud must be. That's what it means, Kofuf Otev. Kofuf essentially means you have a Yetzer Hara. Can you imagine having a Yetzer Hara that's bottled to Yetzer Tev? No, a Yetzer Hara that's bottled to Yetzer Tev is not a Yetzer Hara. So the Rebbe immediately has a problem. The classic Pirush B'Gemara, which is in many places in Shas, says that a Tzaddik V'Rale has some Avedas. Kofuf Bottle Otev means Yetzer Hara, Poshet, doesn't have a capacity to body. And then he qualifies it with a Nigle. In other words, so far we have a machlekes between Kabbalah and Nigle. Now he's going to bring us Stira in Shas itself. Or the Gemara say Peit has the Brachas. Here he brings Takat Makar. But this is a Yetzim and a Klal. This Gemara in Brachas is not typical. Because B'derech Klal and Nigle, Tzaddik Benyani Rasha is like the first set of definitions. You follow? This Gemara in Brachas is a Nigle which is masim to the Zayir Pashas Mishpat. I meant the Pashas. The Gemara say Peit has the Brachas like this. Tzaddikim Eitzev Sheftan B'chol. Tzaddikim are only judged with Eitzev, which means that Alter Rebbe says Tanya Perikid Gimel, they only hear the voice of their Nefesh Elokis. Rishoyim Eitzer Hara Sheftan, and Rasha is a person who is only Eitzer Hara, and you have to say that this means a Rasha V'Rale. Because a Rasha V'Tevlei, Meleim Charotas. Beinanim, V'Tzadachim Gadol. Beinanim, Zev V'Zeh Sheftan. Beinanim hear both voices. Now, Zev V'Zeh Sheftan says Alter Rebbe in Perikid Gimel, V'Lei Zev V'Zeh Meishlan Chas V'Sholem. It doesn't mean that sometimes he listens to one, but sometimes he listens to the other. Then it would say the Lashon Meishla. Shoftan means al derech mashal, a case. We have 3 judges, and one judge gives a voice, and the second judge gives a voice, and the third judge is machriya. The Yetzer Tev gives a voice, Yetzer Hara gives a voice, Nefesh Elokis gives a voice, Nefesh Abamas gives a voice, and you're the judge. Ki ha'amid limin evyin le'tzilim mitei sheftei nafshei. Misheftei nafshei. Alter Rebbe says you have Yetzer Tev and Yetzer Hara. They offer a voice. A Benyani Lepayel always listens to one of the voices, to the Yetzer Tev, and never the Yetzer Hara. Zeva Sheftan means he hears both voices. Wait, now you could still, if you wished, twist this Gemara to conform to the previous Gemara. Right? You don't have to say so far this Gemara, even though it sounds very Chassidish, very like that I'm the Pashas Mishpatim de Le'il. If you want, you could twist it according to the earlier Gemara. That Tzaddik means more than 50% good, and Rosh means 50%. But the Amar Rabbe gives it away. Amar Rabbe, but Rabbe gives you get an Abein, I'm Abein. When Rabbi says, I know Bein, he hear you mukhrach to say, and by the way, I want you to know something, that on this Gemara, it's Yetzev Sheftan Chuli, Bein with Sheftan Chuli, this psukim. You know what's the pasuk for Yetzev Sheftan? Tzaddik Yetzev Sheftan? V'li b'chol b'kirbi. On the next page. David HaMelech says, V'li b'chol b'kirbi, has no Yetzer Hara. That's the raya to this Gemara in Brachas. You understand? The Gemara in Brachas clearly is saying that Tzaddik has no Yetzer Hara. Because David HaMelech says, I killed it. He was born with a Yetzer Hara, and then he did tshuva and hargi b'tainis, he murdered it with tainis. Bottom line is, This is a Gemara, Nigla de Teira, that supports the Pnimistic idea that Tzaddik has B'chlal Mo Yetzer Hara. And Rabbi says, I'm a Beinin. Amalei Abaye says, Abaye te Rabbi l'shalok machayel l'cholberi v'chuli. You're not going to let any person live. Rabbi was a Tzaddik Gomer, Rabbi was a Nasi Adar. The Gemara says that Yetzer Hara couldn't kill Rabbi because he was so Isaac B'teira, and so on and so forth. So Lahavin calls it, we have to understand this. We have to understand, first of all, the contradiction between the Gemara and the Raimahemne. And more B'dakis, what seems like a machlekes between two Gemaras. And of course the answer is that the Gemara in Brachas is consistent with Pnimiyas HaTeira, with the Raya Mehem. It's a Nigla Dika source for a Pnimiyas Dika idea. Well, Lahavin calls it Be'er Heit. To explain all this well. V'gam Lahavin, we have more questions. Masha Amar Iya Bavasa Perikav, the Gemara says in Brachas, in Bavabasra. The Iev says, Rebein, Ishalayla, Ambrad, Zatadiki, Brasa, Rashaim, Chuli. Iev says you created two types of people. Some are the Shaim, and some are Tzaddik, and some are the Shaim. Frag the Alter Rebbe, Vatadi, Veshlaikom, the Gemara says, Mesachta Nideh. That when a person is born, they decide a lot of things about how that person is going to be. And one of the things that's not decided is Hakel b'dei Shemaim chutz mi'yidei Shemaim. They don't say we can be tzaddik in a rasha. This is given over to a person. A person is free to choose whether it's going to be a tzaddik or a rasha. How could Eve say tzaddik tzaddik and rasha Shemaim? It means you have no b'chira, right? And again, the answer is going to be in Tanya Perik Yud Gimel, and then again in Perik Chav Zayin, that it means rasha tzaddik and rasha beinim. That's going to be the tenets. You understand? You understand? But also you create some people to be able to become tzaddikim. But also the Shaim, you created people who will always be in the Madrega of Bein, never kill the Yetzer Hara completely. That's going to be the tenets. The Bechir is to be a Bein in or a Rasha. To be a Bein in him, right. But, so here's another Nikla de Kemoker for the Raya Mehemne. This Gemara in Bava Basra, like the Gemara in Brachas, is a Gemara, it's Shas, it's Nigle, and you see already a Nigla, a Moker for the Zayar. Again, maybe in 100 places in Shas. Tzaddik and Beinim Rishaya means Yossi Mechzal Mechzal, Yossi Mechzal Mechzal, Mechzal Mechzal. But you found the Gemara in Brachas and the Gemara in Bava Basra that support the Raya Mehemne, the Zayir. Okay, now, V'gam Lahavim, we have to also understand what is the level of Beinani according to the Raya Mehemne and according to the Gemara in Bava Basra. Shevavada, you have to say, based on the Gemara in Bava Basra and the Raya Mehemne, that any mechzazach is a mechzavedus. You cannot say that a Beini is half merits and half avedus, even though that's the classic Batzinu b'Gemara Hechalukas and the classic Pirshu b'Gemara with which the Alter Rebbe began, which is what the Rambam brings the Allah and Tshuva, that a Beini is 50-50. Says the Alter Rebbe, that opinion that Beini is 50-50 is not going to be consistent, not with the Raya Mehemne, not with the Gemara in Berachas, not with the Gemara in Bava Basra. Shimkein, because if a Beini is 50-50, Echta Rabba v'Yatz Melei Mishu Beini, how could Rabba have made the mistake that he's a Beini? Everybody knows, he never stopped to learn from Torah for a moment. Even the Malachamavas couldn't kill him, and the Gemara says the whole story about Metzia, how they tricked him and they frightened him until he stopped learning and he passed away, and the last thing he said was Tahir. The Gemara says about Rabbi Akiva and about Rabbi Banachmeni that Ashrecha Rabbi Nishmascha Tahir Tahir v'Yatz Nishmascha B'Tahara. He said Tahir. He passed him the Machlekes in Kutchabricha Mesitta at the moment of his Histalkas. He said Tahir. It's been Rabbi. The Malachamavas couldn't rule over him. How could he make a mistake and say he's half Avedis if he was Lepasipum? So the Alter Rebbe says that we have a problem here. Right? First of all, we have clearly a Machlekes to Gemara and Zayar. And second of all, we have at least two Gemaras and Shas that's consistent with the Zayar. Now he asks more questions. When a person does even one Aveda, the moment he's doing an Aveda, it's called the Rosh Hashanah, and the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring a makkah for it. He says it as a matter of fact. While you're doing an Aveda, you call it Rosh. Finished. If this is the first Aveda of your life, you're tzaddik. Nay. The fact is, why are you doing Aveda Rosh? He doesn't bring a makkah, so you have to find a makkah. The Alter Rebbe is soisim. He tells you should know why you're doing an Aveda Rosh. And you later do tshuva, you call tzaddik. Even if you have 75% avedus, 80% avedus, 20% mitzvahs, when you're doing tshuva at that moment tzaddik, weiter he doesn't bring a makkah. Right? Two statements on makkedas. If you do even the smallest aveda, which is the Rabban and Mikri Rashi, you call the Rasha, and here he brings the Gemara. He brings two sources of Gemara in Yavamas, Perik Beis, and in Perik Aleph of Nida. So the first two he doesn't bring a makkah for because Alter Rebbe must feel that it must be in common bekemis. But the third thing, Vaistois Alter Rebbe feels that it's hard to find, so he brings you two makkahs to this idea, two places in Shas where Isser Kasha Divrei Sefer makes it into a Rosh. Huh? No. The Pashas there's many makkahs for this earlier concept. The Kukim Masech the Yuma, which is what Tshuva is about Tshuva. Even if your Aveda is a Sheval Tas, not you did something wrong, you just didn't do something right. And the thing you didn't do right is not klapping yourself, it's klapping somebody else. You should have protested somebody else's Aveda, and you didn't stop them. The Gemara says in the Shvuas that if you could be Mechiach as Aveda you don't, you're a Rasha for not stopping somebody else from an Aveda. Huh? I don't know what it's called. So, when you don't do the mitzvah saseh of stopping somebody else's an Aveda, you become a Rasha. One Aveda makes you a Rasha. One Aveda makes you a Rasha. Right? So how do we read this? B'shal she's Aveda is even one Aveda you're a Rasha. Tshuva is tzaddik. Isekal is a Rasha. Micha. Right? Micha means you could stop somebody else from doing an Aveda. You have to do a positive thing of stopping somebody else, and you don't do the positive Rasha. How much more so? The Mavatla is a mitzvah say. Matla mitzvah say. Is also a mitzvah. Right? Stopping somebody else, being moich from somebody else's Aveda, for you it's not a lav, it's an essence. You're doing something proactive to stop him from doing an Aveda. You didn't do it, you're called a Rasha. Allah has kama v'kama if you could do a mitzvah for yourself. Like learn Torah. You could do it. For example, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, if you could learn Torah, you don't learn Torah. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, you have shamed the words of God, etc. And the Gemara says he called us for a mitzvah saseh. Yeah? So pshita. If a person fails to learn Torah, which is the bittul essence, not a lav, the Mikir Rasha Tfei, you're the bigger Rasha. For this bittul aseh, may even is the Rabbanan, from doing a lav the Rabbanan. The Alter Rebbe is making a kavochem, it's interesting. It's worse not to do a mitzvah, say deraisa, and to do aveda the Rabbanan. Even though the aveda the Rabbanan goes in the category of lav, and bittul Talmud Torah is a header of an eseh, nevertheless, he says for sure it's logical to say that the bittul aseh of Talmud Torah is a bigger aveda than avis of the Rabbanan. V'im kain, and we already know that if a person's avis of the Rabbanan, mikir Rasha, al korach habeini, for sure habeini ain't be afil avim bittul Torah, doesn't have a bittul Torah. Favos. What's the right that the Bein doesn't have avim bittul Torah? Because Rabbi called himself a Beinani, and Rabbi the Pasuk Mimmi gives it. So if Rabbi calls himself a Beinani, and ain't be avim bittul Torah because the Pasuk Mimmi gives it, for sure he doesn't have a lesser aveda. I think I just said something wrong, but okay. Therefore, Rabbi says that he was a Beinani. Now, Lapel Rabbi is wrong to say that he's a Beinani. But the reason Rabbi is able to make a mistake and say that he's a Beinani, because a Beinani doesn't even have a bittul Torah. So the Gemara, the classic Gemara, which says Beinani is mechza al mechza, is problematic. Right? Because the Rabbi says he's a Beinani. So basically what we have is we started with Nigle, we moved on to Raimahemne, Zeya, Nister, and we supported the Raimahemne with two Gemaras, a Gemara in Berachas and a Gemara in Bava Basra. And then we have a bunch of other Rayalach from different sources that one Avedi makes you a Rasha, one Tshuva makes you a Tzaddik, and so forth. So for sure, Beinani is not Mechza Mechza. Hagor. Machkosa b'zeyach elegimel daf reish lamed aleph. The Zayir itself says, Kol shemu mu'atan avanetza v'chuli, whoever has fewer Avedas. In other words, we are trying to establish, that's a machlekes Nigle and Nister. The Gemara holds that Tzaddik is more than 50% good. Rasha holds more than 50% evil. Beinani is 50-50. The Raya Mehem, the Pashat Bat in the Zeya, Pnimius Ateda says, Harasha Beikav of a Tev, that a Tzaddik really has no Avedis, because he has no Yetzer Hara. In the Zeya itself, there's different Shittas. It's like Klotz Kash. In other words, there's a Zoya that supports the classic Shitta of the Gemara, Kol Shemuat Navenesov. You understand the kasha? So that even in Zohar, we see the Niglidika Pshat in Tzaddik Beinani Rasha, that if you have less than 50% Avedis, you call the Tzaddik. And for the Alter Rebbe, no. First of all, he shals Abnun Elyo. That's a kasha Abnun As Elyo. Aval if he chooses Elyo, Sham Elyo answers Abnun and he disagrees. No, Abnun, you're making a mistake. That Apirish Tzaddik V'Alehu, Kumesher Kosa B'Rayim Hem Nepash B'Totin Delil. First of all, the Taich Tzaddik V'Alehu, like we said earlier, Take. Sharasha Beikofa Fotev, he has no Yitzhak at all. And second of all, V'Shivim Panamateda. V'Shivim Panamateda, the second tenet. That we can sagen that in Zeir also there's Taka different Nefan. In other words, there could be Taka in Zeir, a Shita which is consistent with the Gemara. Or B'mir Teil Dafanan, that we want to separate these two sets of definitions of Tzaddik Ben Rashta, and we're interested only in the second one.